Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss 1492, Conquest of Paradise, starring Gerard Depardieu, forgive me if I said that wrong, just like this name, Armand Asante, and Sigourney Weaver, directed by Ridley Scott. Now, this is a movie I'm not too familiar with, nor has I've ever heard of this, no. So let's get straight into this. We start 500 years before the release of this movie back in 1992, which happens to be 1492, as we start in Spain, which looks beautiful thanks to the cinematography, as it looks beautiful, as Christopher Columbus, played by Gerard Depardieu, teaches his son Fernando about looking into the distance as he learns he has to go to war and he wants to discover new lands. And am I following this plot? So far not really, as I don't understand what in the hell is going on in this movie. And this movie is already a long movie at 2.5 hours. The townspeople witness something burning, and the next day comes, and the audience gets in a courtroom as we hear Columbus's proposal, which is asking for a trade for something, as the dialogue I did not understand either. Maybe it's because of their accents, as they're hard to understand, and no offense to the Spaniards, but I can't understand a damn word they're saying, as they tell Columbus to say and as he has a meltdown, as because he's waited long enough, and gets a meltdown and gets sucker punched in the face, which knocks him out, which I found this scene to be hysterical. Columbus meets Pinzon, played by Checky Cario, whom I've seen in Bad Boys 1, but I know him first from a Jet Li film called Kiss of the Dragon, where he was the bad guy, and he was also the bad guy in Bad Boys 1. And he usually plays the bad guys, but he helps Columbus out with his mission, saying it's possible it could happen, and they see Spain is falling apart. And I honestly don't like the characters, as I don't even know who any of these people are. I mean, I know Christopher Columbus from what I've heard in history class, but this movie feels like an insult to his reputation. And Columbus meets with Queen Isabel, played by Sigourney Weaver, about Columbus's proposal of finding new land, and she lets him go, as well as the council, led by Sanchez, played by Armand Asante, doesn't go with it. And I can feel the movie's length as it drags quite a bit, and I can feel it. And director Ridley Scott needs to tell this story. And does director Ridley Scott really need to tell this story? No way in hell. Queen Isabel overhears Columbus and Sanchez talking about his proposal, as the Queen laughs and comes in after Columbus leaves the room, as his proposal is accepted by Sanchez to find a new piece of land, and his family say goodbye to Columbus as he sets sail to a new world. And there are great shots in the sea, and I wish we got more of a movie about the great shots at the sea while we meet the captain named Mendez, played by Kevin Dunn with a terrible accent. But I do like the shot with the stars, as that worked for me more than the rest of the movie, as this movie is already feeling forgettable in my opinion. The ship is still sailing while Pinzon realizes Columbus lied to him about where they're going and tells everyone about where they're actually going, as the acting was staled, in my opinion, while the actors did kind of a poor job with their characters. They find a piece of land on an island, and they stop there for the day, as they put their feet on the island the next day, and Columbus claims and names the island San Salvador, which is accurate to history, I suppose, and the men explore San Salvador while I'm bored out of my frickin' mind. And I was expecting something scarier, as they see some natives, but nothing happened while their encounter, so at this point I was bored. This movie is boring. The natives take Columbus and his men to their village and laugh and somehow become friends, which is accurate to history, as they have fun with each other and learn from one another. And one day it starts to rain, and they leave the island because they were treated like gods, which was said in a narration. And they get to another island with more natives, and their adventures are kind of neat, accurate to the history books. But do we need a movie about Christopher Columbus? Maybe if it's told by better actors than, say, Gerard Depardieu, as I don't know who this guy is, but I have seen him in a couple of movies I don't remember in. For example, Babylon AD, which is a Vin Diesel film, and in an upcoming review of Ang Lee's Life of Pi, which I haven't done yet, but I'll get there. but he doesn't pull off the performance of Christopher Columbus, as he felt muscular in the role. I don't know if he was muscular in the history books. Back at home, Sanchez celebrates the marriage of Queen Isabel and a new King Ferdinand. As we learn, Pinzon is dead, and I thought the guy was on the ship with Columbus, as I was really confused while the king and queen are delivered food from natives, and I guess Columbus was there, and the celebration scene confused the hell out of me, as Columbus and his sparring partner spar with each other, as Francisco comes to Columbus and asks to come with him to his adventure, but he feels rejected after Columbus said not no to begin with, as this isn't a bad time at the movies, but it was a hard time in general. Columbus kicks Bartolome off the crew as he needs him, and they get off on their next adventure, and I can't tell what was going on at this point. And the more it goes on, the more confused I am, and the less I like this movie, as it goes absolutely nowhere. Some natives touch a horse of one of Columbus's men, and the horse freaks out for some reason at all, and Columbus's men shoot up in the air as Columbus asks what happened to his head, as one of his men, Moxica, wants to kill the natives while Columbus comes in peace and wants to help them by building a bell for them, and Moxica doesn't want his horse to work while with them while everybody has to work. And they get the bell installed and working, as it was built to a church of some kind, as this movie slows way the hell down. Well, it can use some editing down, because like I said earlier, this movie is far too long. Moxica asks a native a question and is led to believe he's lying, and suddenly cuts his head off, as I get the impression Moxica is the bad guy of this movie, as he comes off slimy and evil. And the next day, Columbus gets the news as Moxica hangs some of the natives after their death, and Columbus witnesses it, and they somehow go to war with each other. And one of the natives attack Columbus and gets in a brutal fight, as the natives want to kill all of Columbus's men, no thanks to Moxica. And we move on to the next scene at nighttime, and this went on a little too long. Moxica burns down a building as Columbus sees what he's done, and Columbus wants to go to war with Moxica, and Moxica's men shoots down Columbus's men. And this war scene is terrible, as Columbus looks for Moxica, and he doesn't find him, as he says Columbus is nothing compared to him. And Moxica drops himself to death, and dies, and I could care less about this character in any way necessary. Columbus gets a message from a man who wants to leave and go back to Spain, as the man does, and this is getting more and more painful to watch, and at this point I fell asleep on the first time I viewed this movie, as buildings were getting destroyed and people were dying during these scenes, and Sanchez reads a letter about how Columbus was executed, while Queen Isabel was wondering who will form such a task, and at this point I just don't care. Bobadilla is asked to take over Columbus's task, and they go out there and see Columbus is arrested and is visited by Diego and Fernando, who's much older now, and Queen Isabel is visited by Columbus, and Columbus looks for a reason to come back to Spain, and he does give one, as Sanchez believes Columbus isn't allowed back in Spain, and they have a courthouse meeting about if Columbus should return to Spain, and he does stay, and Fernando writes a letter from Columbus, and the climax was boring me out of my damn skull, as this is the most bored and the most boring I've seen out of any of them until I get to Napoleon, before I get to Gladiator 2. Well, but for now, let's get to the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.1 out of 10. The cinematography is beautiful throughout, but I had no idea what in the hell was going on, as I couldn't follow this damn plot, and this felt long, as this is a long movie at 2.5 hours, as this movie drags. And I can't understand the dialogue for their accents, and no offense to the Spaniards, but I can't understand a piece of dialogue on this godforsaken film. And I don't like the characters, as I know Christopher Columbus from the history books. And this movie feels like an insult to his reputation. The movie is absolutely forgettable, as this feels like an insult to history, and I can't believe this movie exists. But honestly, I don't even know what it's about, nor will I remember this movie like Steven Spielberg's Amistad, as this is a non-recommendation, as it bored the living hell out of me. And hopefully the next movie director Ridley Scott doesn't make me fall asleep out of boredom. So I would like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with, let's see here, White Squall, the Jeff the Dude Man movie. I'm curious about this one. And until then, we all follow Christopher Columbus in history books.